This week in the Regency, it's about carriages. And it's about a specific carriage, which I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce. So I have always called it a Landau, mainly because that's how the actor Martin Landau pronounces his name. And then I thought I better double check that. It might not be the same before I make this video. And there's apparently two pronunciations, Landau and Landau or Landau. Now, I suspect this second pronunciation is actually the name of the town in which this type of carriage was first made. It's in Germany. So any German speakers, maybe you could tell me in the comments exactly how to pronounce it. Anyway, I'm going to say Landau in this video. And our jumping off point today is the Nottingham Journal of the 18th of July, 1812. And when I looked for Landau in newspapers, there were like hundreds of for sales over the course of the Regency. But I liked this one for a very specific reason. H. Pattenden, coach and coach harness maker, Mount Street, Nottingham, takes this opportunity of informing his friends, the nobility, gentry, and the public in general, that he has now on sale a very elegant new Landau, finished according to the present London fashion. Now, what I love about this is two things. One is the present London fashion, like we've got the latest, come to us. But I also like his friends, the nobility, gentry, and the public in general. So everybody but his enemies. I'll sell to anybody. Anybody who's got the money, which of course, no doubt he would. But the introduction of the nobility, gentry, and the public, the nobility and the gentry were the people who were most likely able to afford a Landau because it was not cheap. I also liked here the variety of new and second-hand gigs that will be sold cheap and are well worth the attention, not of the nobility and the gentry, but of the public. So he's prepared to sell all sorts of things to all sorts of people, but it was the nobility and the gentry he expects really to buy the Landau. And what is it? Okay, it's an open carriage. So this is our first really open carriage. And it's an open carriage which can be closed. This is how it looks when it's open. This is one of the British state Landaus. And I just want you to pay attention to the kind of decorations that are on there, because that is what we would expect to see on the kinds of Landaus that were being made for the nobility and gentry. I would also like you to pay attention to what the coach woman in this case is sitting on. Those of you who saw our last video on coaches will recognize the hammercloth of livery. So there it is. I wish I'd found this photo last month, but that is a genuine hammercloth of livery there. When the hood comes up, we get this. Now, this is a slightly later version, and you can see it has glass in the window, but the original versions may or may not have had the glass. And there are later versions that have glass at the front and the back as well as the sides, and they refer to them as 5 glass Landaus, but they do tend to be later than the Regency. And you can see here that the glass would be sliding up from the door. So the glass would be part of the door, and when the two pieces come up, the glass then would slide up from the doorway and connect to the top of the cover. So what does our coachmaker William Felton have to say about this? He loves the Landau. A Landau is a carriage in the form of a coach. So that's the coach body, the bottom part of the body, the upper part of which may be opened at pleasure for the advantage of air and prospect in the summertime, principally intended for country use. They are the most convenient carriage of any, as so many persons may be accommodated with the pleasure of an open and a closed carriage in one, without the care of driving, as in other open carriages. So in a curricle or a gig, you're driving yourself, rather than having a driver. So you get an open carriage, but you don't have to drive it yourself, is what he's saying. Or the expense and encumbrance of keeping two, that is an open and a closed carriage, and the expense for duty saved thereby. So there were various taxes on carriages, are advantages worth the notice of those who wish to be thus accommodated. Now, the upper parts are covered with a black grain leather, which cannot be japanned, which is a kind of weatherproofing, but leather is, generally speaking, weatherproof. But so what he's saying there basically is don't go out in a really bad rainstorm. And of course, does not look so well as fixed roofs. They are also heavier and more expensive than the common coaches, which are the principal objections to them, but are trifling when compared to the other advantages they possess. So this is interesting. He clearly likes the Landau, but he's saying they're more expensive. Perhaps that's why he likes them. How much does it cost? First charge for a Landau with a perch carriage. Remember, the perches are the crane perches of the metal parts that the carriage sits from. £120, 11 shillings, which is quite a lot of money. I thought I'd just compare it to the cost of a postchaise. So the first cost of a postchaise is £93, 1 shilling and sixpence. The first cost of a Landau is £120, 11 shillings. So there's quite a significant difference. I mean, £27 there is quite a lot of money in comparison. And of course, the postchaises, although they weren't open carriages, you could let the windows down at the front and probably at the side, so you would get the fresh air coming through. But of course, they could only take two people, and they face forward. If we look at the picture of the Landau again, we can see that that people sat on either side of the door, and this particular they faced each other, and this was called vis-a-vis, the French term of face to face. Typically, those of lower class, like your maid, would sit facing backwards so that they would sit with their back to the horses. The higher caste people, the higher class people, would sit with their face to the horses, and they would get to see things, and so it was also that people who were subject to travel sickness, coach sickness, they typically tried to sit facing forwards. Facing backwards made it worse. It's definitely more expensive. But what if you added everything in, including the hammercloth of livery? Well, if you had added everything, you got the postchaise cost £192, 13 shillings and sixpence. And the cost of the Landau is £185, 16 shillings and sixpence. So it evens out depending on how much bling you want. And for the postchaise, the most expensive thing was the hammercloth of livery for when you actually want a driver rather than postilions. Because, of course, you can turn it into a town chariot by putting a box on it. And it was the town chariot that had the hammercloth of livery. I'm sorry, I just love that phrase. In terms of a Landau, the most expensive extra was, again, associated with staff, a footman's cushion-plated top edge of brass mouldings with carved hind standards. So that's the Landau. It's it's clearly for nice weather. It's also clearly something in which one wishes to be seen. So in a postchaise, or a town chariot, if you wanted not to be seen, typically they had either curtains or shutters that came up. And so you could have some privacy for your assignations. But in a Landau, everybody pretty much is on view, because even, I guess you could have curtains on the glass that comes up, but that would be more difficult, I suspect, to create. So it's basically for a nice summer's day. You go out for a picnic, you can pull the things up if a summer rain comes along, or if it gets too hot. You can pull the covers over the top of your head. But ideally, one uses it to be seen in, and to see the world as one goes past. So it is quite expensive, and one of the things that makes it expensive is that it's a coach body. That is, it's quite big. And so people went also for a slightly smaller piece, and that was the Landaulet. Here we have an ad from July 1815. Carriages for sale in Newcastle. It's from the Durham County Advertiser. A good second-hand Landaulet, a phaeton, a dog cart. So it's kind of lumped in with smaller carriages. What does William Felton say about it? This carriage has the same advantage as the Landau, only that the number of passengers are proportionately less. But for convenience, where only one carriage is kept, none exceeds it for country use. When a demi-Landau, so that's the same, the Landaulet, the demi-Landau is the same thing. When a demi-Landau is used open, the common sort of coach box is objectionable, being so high as to take away the prospect in front, which is principally obscured by the coachman sitting there. He's sitting up here, and that's going to spoil the view for the people in the back. A boot with a concealed chair or coach box when used as a Landau answers best. The common coach box may be added occasionally for town use. So what I think they're talking about there is they're going to take away this box, this brown box, and move the coachman's seat downwards. And then you would have a concealed chair. That is, you're looking over the top of the head of your coachman. I can see that would be very safe, honestly, because the coachman's not going to be able to see the road very well. The common coach box may be added occasionally for town use, the same as to a post chariot. The mode of finishing will answer for any other description except only the difference in price between a postchaise and a demi-Landau. So what is the difference in price? £107, 2 shillings and sixpence. And if you have everything, all the extras, it's £156, 10 shillings and threepence. And if we remember again with the postchaise, the first cost of the postchaise was £93. So the demi-Landau is definitely, it's definitely more expensive. Why would one buy a Landau rather than a coach? To see and be seen, to enjoy the open air, to be able to go out on a picnic on a nice summer's day, and also for people who got travel sick. The closed carriages were notorious for making people sick, particularly postchaises. They weren't called yellow bounders for nothing. So if you were somebody who was prone to travel sickness, you might well get yourself a Landau and only travel when the weather was good. But it's mainly, I think, it's also a status symbol. Austen goes out of her way to mention when her characters are going to travel in a landau or a barouche, which is a very similar carriage. So it's clearly meaningful in terms of class to own a landau. And I think that's its main attraction. That if you're parading around town or around your town in the country in a landau, everybody knows that you're, as the saying was then, flush in the pocket. That's this week in the Regency. I'm Elizabeth Layden. I'll see you next week in the Regency.